Wanted to talk a bit about some of the conversations we've been having on social media, LinkedIn in particular. For those of you that follow Third Stage or myself on LinkedIn, we like to post questions and stir up discussion and controversy and that sort of thing on social media. And we recently asked some questions around change management and buy-in and alignment. Those are some of the things we've been covering and discussing on social media lately. And Parisa, you had some observations about what people are saying and what some of the feedback is that we're getting from some of our listeners.
Yeah, definitely. So you had two interesting posts that I wanted to just bring up. They started to go viral. So I thought, what a great conversation to bring onto the show. So I'll pose the question first, and I want to highlight a couple answers that we saw, and just kind of get some more context from you as well. So the first one, you posted, you love consulting because you're always learning something new. And you said, the other day, a client said that resource constraints go away when you have buy-in. In other words, perhaps resources aren't as limited when people support and throw their weight behind a project. So when an ERP project team complains about not having enough resources, are they really saying that they just don't have enough resources for this project? Which, I mean, if you think about it, it would seem to be true. And one of the responses that stood out to me was from Wayne Sadin, and he said, buy-in from the CEO and other executives makes resources appear magically, just like that, right? So it's like if you have the top leaders in the company fully behind the project, what really could stop you? So I guess this prompted a question for me when it comes to OCM, organizational change management. It really starts with the leaders. I mean, it's going to be a top-down approach. It doesn't come from the bottom up, right? So I guess, was your client specifically talking about resource constraints taking a backseat when executives are not necessarily bought in, or were they referring to the whole organization, and just like money and all the different resources that go into it?
Yeah, so this particular client, and that's the beauty, like I mentioned in the post, the beauty of consulting is, a lot of people, most people hire us because we're the experts, but along the way, we're constantly learning from our clients and picking up new nuances and learning new things along the way. And this particular client was just talking about the organization in general, about how when there wasn't buy-in or before they had the level of buy-in they have now, they felt the need or the pressure to sort of throw resources at that problem and put more people on it, or force more people to get engaged. But once they backed up and had more buy-in and got people more involved in some of the decision making and the planning and the execution of the project, then it sort of shifted to where people were excited about the project. They bought in, and suddenly you didn't have to throw resources at the problem of buy-in because people were already buying in. So I just thought that was just an interesting nuance. It makes total sense, but I hadn't ever thought of it in that way before.
Right. And I mean, if you think about it, if anybody has skin in the game, you're going to perform better, regardless of, if you're playing in a baseball game or you're going through a digital transformation. If your whole team is intrigued and is fully engaged and is doing what they can to get to the finish line, I mean, usually you're going to get to the finish line. So I think that's going to be interesting, as we talk to Wayne about the Queensland Health challenges as well, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So that kind of took me to the next one, and this one really got a lot of engagement, which I thought was interesting. It's specifically around executive alignment, and we've talked a lot about executive alignment specifically. So your question was, what is the most common problem you see with executive alignment and support on ERP and digital transformation initiatives? There was there's a lot of discussion on this one, which I thought was interesting. I think the main theme I saw was executives are kind of looking for a quick fix. In some cases, not all cases, right, of course, but they're looking for that one system that can come in and fix all their problems. They go through the transformation and then they want to just kind of coast and, reap the benefits rather than doing system upkeep, etc. David Joe Armstrong also said, standing on the sidelines, watching, not leading, not participating, not actively supporting the change, which I think goes back to your first question. They're not necessarily bought in as they should be. So I guess, when you look at this, the people who are leading the charge, it really starts with them, right? I mean, if you think about it, could I pose the question that you are setting yourself up for failure if you don't have the first and most important step, which is executive alignment and executive buy-in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the source of most headwinds, or a lot of the headwinds that projects face, is that the executives either aren't aligned, or they're not on board, or they're not engaged enough, and that sort of trickles down to the rest of the organization when that happens. To where, if the executives aren't aligned, the chances are fairly high that the rest of the organization isn't aligned. Decision making becomes a problem. There's a lot of infighting or uncertainty over what the direction of the company or the operational model or the organizational changes should be. And that just leads to a lot of delays, cost overruns, derailment of projects, all that stuff.
So it's interesting to kind of look at the root cause of it. It all comes back to where's the leadership's head at. There was a lot of good comments about how executives will follow and believe what the software vendors are sharing, which kind of goes back to that expectations conversation, as well as one of the red flags of going down the road of an ERP failure. So I guess when you're looking for a magic pill in a software, according to Nathan Reese, he called it the magic pill of softwares that comes in and solves all your problems. I think, if you're looking for that and the software vendor positions it as such, I mean, it will cloud the whole project. So, I mean, when you look at system upkeep, let's kind of talk about that. I mean, yeah, it'll be the upfront work of inputting your data, getting the software up and running. But at a high level, what do companies need to keep in mind that is going to be kind of that ongoing work of system upkeep and maintenance to make sure that their new software, whatever that may be, is performing at an optimal capacity?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that organizations need to do is just to make sure that as their business evolves and changes and grows, and as the technology evolves and changes and grows over time, you have to make sure those two things stay in sync. Because where you are today or where you are on day one of go live, even assuming you've implemented perfectly, you've met all your business needs and requirements, things are going to change over time. And the direction you go as an organization and the direction that the software vendor does especially with its automatic upgrades through the cloud, in most cases for most ERP vendors, you're going to have changes to the software that either aren't aligned with the way you're going, or it's just a change to where people need to be trained and need to become more comfortable with the way that that's shifting. So that's probably the biggest thing, is just making sure that you don't view go live as the end of the project. You have this continuous improvement cycle throughout, to where you're constantly keeping your technology and your business and your organization, all three of those things, aligned throughout time.
That makes sense, having harmony across the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Sam Graham also, he shared a story which I thought was interesting. He was speaking with a production director at a trailer manufacturing company. He said, you've probably heard of it, so it's probably a more well-known brand. And they had an ERP system, but they weren't really using it. And instead, he was proudly showing his spreadsheets of how they keep track of all their orders, all their, trailer production, etc. And he said, I looked at them and said, here's an order that is due next week and is not scheduled to be made. Here's an order that's due to be completed, but it's not scheduled to even be started. Here's an order for 50 trailers that you've scheduled to be made in 6 batches of 10. So just those inefficiencies are like mind blowing, right? I mean, these guys are leaving so much on the table, and he said they're still in business, but they haven't made a profit after several years. So it's really realizing the benefits that an ERP system can do for you. And if you've already implemented it and you're not optimizing what you have in front of you, it's just a huge lost opportunity for businesses, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's very true, and it's amazing to me how often organizations focus so myopically on how much is this transformation going to cost me now. So in other words, how do I minimize or optimize the cost and time it takes me to put in this new technology and all these changes that come along with it? But they don't think about what the impact of the organization is longer term. So I could save a bunch of money and implement an ERP system or business technology as quickly as any client possibly could want, or a team could, I should say. But that doesn't mean it's going to go well. It doesn't mean it's going to look pretty on the other side. It doesn't mean it's not going to cost you a ton of money trying to fix all the problems that are caused by implementing faster and cheaper than you might otherwise want to. So I think really looking at the full picture of not just what are you spending today, how much time and resources are you spending today to implement new changes, but longer term, what is that impact going to look like? And ideally, you want to be focused on the business value, like you and Sam are talking about here, which is how do we get, not just not screw things up, but how do we make things better? And so many companies just try not to screw things up. It's such a low bar that they set. When in reality, the technology, all these transformations that people go through, the intent is to make our business better and to be more profitable and effective and all that good stuff. But for whatever reason, organizations tend to lose sight of that oftentimes when they go through these transformations.
Interesting. It's like, what are you looking at? I remember hearing a study of if you're driving and you're looking at a tree, you're going to probably veer toward the tree. So if your eye's not on the right target, you're probably not going to hit the target. So
yeah, that's a great analogy. I might start using that.
Go for it. Yeah. I mean, and this production director, I mean, he's one of the top guys. He's leading the charge and he's still stuck in his spreadsheets. Sounds like some, a good case of the resistance going from top down approach. That's why they're in the position they're in. So I feel like that plays into our, kind of looking into what happened with Queensland Health. I'm so curious.
Yeah. There's a lot of really interesting things to talk about there. And then the interesting part of the failure of Queensland Health, as we'll talk about here in a minute, is a lot of it does stem from lack of alignment at the top, lack of organizational change management, or a focus on the people aspects of change. And you use the term root cause, and what are the root causes of why projects fail? It's easy to get caught up in things like, our project management wasn't very good. We didn't have a good project manager. Our project plan wasn't good, or we over customized the software. Those are all very real problems, but when you really peel back the onion and dig in, you usually find out that it's not just because people wanted to customize or because you just had a bad project manager. Chances are there's something underneath that, those are just symptoms of a deeper problem. So that's very true for a lot of transformations, and certainly for Queensland Health, as we'll talk about here in our case study here in a few minutes. So we're going to take a quick break. Thanks for bringing up some of these discussion points. These are really interesting points. And by the way, for those of you that don't already follow us on LinkedIn, be sure to follow Third Stage Consulting on LinkedIn to join in these conversations. You can also follow me, Eric Kimberling, on LinkedIn as well. We're also out on Facebook and Twitter, but LinkedIn is where we would arguably do most of the engaging that we do in social media. So I encourage you to follow us there.